Have you ever wondered how some people manage to remain good even after being rejected, judged, and hurt by everyone around them? Kuina is exactly that kind of person. She was not born strong, she was not born prepared for the games of life, but she decided to turn all the pain, all the prejudice, and all the insecurity into silent strength. It is contradictory, I know. How can someone who suffered so much still be a light for others? That is exactly what we are going to discover. Today, you will dive into each trauma, each choice, and each gesture of Kuina, and in the end, you may realize that your own pain can also be a secret weapon. If you are a fan of cinema, psychology, and want to understand the mind behind your favorite character, subscribe to the channel so you do not miss any video. Where in the world are you watching this video from now? Leave your answer in the comments. Kuina is not just another lost player in Alice in Borderland. She is like that person you look at and feel that they carry a silent strength, yet full of untold stories. Her presence already draws attention. Calm, elegant, but at the same time with a gaze that hides deep scars. And that is exactly what makes her journey so engaging, because behind every gesture of hers, there is a huge weight of experiences. Imagine someone who had to fight from an early age to be recognized, to truly exist without apologizing for who they are. Kuina represents exactly that invisible struggle that so many people face daily, and that immediately creates identification, who has never had to prove their own worth in environments that were not prepared to accept it. It is like being on a lit stage but being tested with every movement. But unlike many who harden because of difficulties, Kuina did not let herself be swallowed by the coldness of the world. She chose to proceed with sensitivity, choosing to be loyal, fair, and above all, human. That is rare. Often when someone is constantly hurt, they tend to build an impenetrable armor. But she did not. Her strength comes not from ice, but from the fire of resistance. And this resistance is not loud. It does not express itself in shouts or explosions. It is subtle but constant, like that flame that never goes out. And this flame is born precisely from the pains she has already faced. It is almost as if Kuina says, "I have been at the bottom of the well, but I remain standing." This feeling is powerful because it connects with anyone who has ever felt invisible, undervalued, or even rejected. It is curious because in the midst of the chaos of life or death games, she maintains a surprising lightness. Her calm contrasts with the frantic environment, almost as proof that those who have survived their own internal war are not easily frightened by external noise. This detail makes all the difference. Kuina does not merely react to what happens, she observes, understands, and acts with emotional intelligence. At the same time, there is something magnetic about the way she is present. It is not just what she says, but how she looks, how she listens, how she respects the space of others. It seems little, but in reality, it is immense. In a game where selfishness could be the rule, Kuina shows another route, that of building true alliances. Perhaps this is exactly what makes her so memorable. Now, if we think about it carefully, this posture reveals a strength that goes far beyond physical survival. Kuina survives because she knows who she is. She does not need to imitate anyone. She does not need to hide behind masks to play. That is liberating. It is like when we stop trying to please everyone and start acting authentically, the game changes completely. And perhaps it is precisely this that opens space for us to better understand her essence. Because before being a player trying to survive in Alice in Borderland, Kuina is a living portrait of emotional resistance, of strength amidst pain, and of the courage to continue being good even when the world insists on being cruel. But where does this uncommon strength come from? That is where her story begins to reveal the internal conflicts that shaped who she is. Kuina's story is not a straight line. It is full of curves, obstacles, and falls that could have destroyed anyone. From an early age, she had to deal with a world that did not accept her identity, an environment that demanded she become someone she never wanted to be. That would already be heavy enough, but in her case, every judgmental look, every cutting word, acted like an open wound that accumulated over time. Growing up in a space that should have been protective but turned into a battlefield is a type of pain few understand. The home, the family, is often a place of shelter, but for Kuina, it was precisely there that she experienced one of the greatest sources of rejection. It is hard to realize that the love you expect does not come, and worse, that it comes conditioned only if you are what they expect. And the cruelest part is that behind all the strength she shows, there is a past of silent loneliness. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but of not being truly seen. It corrodes. It is like being in a room full of people and still feeling invisible because no one recognizes who you really are. Kuina faced this from an early age, and it marked her journey. Still, instead of getting lost in this emptiness, she found a way to rebuild herself. But it was not simple. This process is like walking through a labyrinth full of mirrors. In each reflection, she saw a piece of herself that others tried to erase, but she would not let die. This insistence on asserting herself, on being authentic, shaped her strength. Think for a moment. How many times have you felt that you had to fit into a mold that was not yours? Kuina lived this amplified. Society wanted to mold her one way, but her essence screamed another. This conflict is painful because it is almost a war between what you feel and what they say you should feel. And winning this war requires a rare kind of courage, and that courage did not come out of nowhere. It was built with tears, with falls, and with the constant feeling of fighting alone. Yet in the midst of all this, Kuina learned something precious. No one can define who you are beyond yourself. This lesson is the heart of her journey. It is as if every time the world tried to silence her voice, she shouted even louder in silence. This conflict between the internal and the external gives depth to the character, because what we see in Alice in Borderland is not just a player. It is the result of years of struggle, resistance, and reaffirmation of her own identity. She did not reach that point by chance. Every gesture of hers in the game carries the weight of this story. But if Kuina's story already carries so many battles, imagine when we truly dive into her traumas. It is at this point that we begin to understand not only who she is, but where all the strength that makes her unique comes from, even in a world that insists on putting her on her knees. The strength of Kuina to overcome everything and still be a good person. What impresses about Kuina is not only survival, but the way she chooses to survive. Many people, after facing so much rejection, prejudice, and insecurity, would have hardened to the point of feeling nothing. She did not. Kuina decided that pain would not define her essence, but rather the way she transformed that pain into something greater. It is as if she says, "I have suffered enough, but I will not allow the world to steal my humanity." This choice seems simple, but it is not. Think of how many times someone hurt you and your immediate reaction was to close off, distrust, or even want to retaliate. It is a defense instinct. Kuina, on the other hand, learned to filter this instinct and choose to be good even when the world did not deserve it. This does not mean naivety, but emotional maturity. She understands that it is not worth becoming what hurt her. This strength manifests silently, almost imperceptibly, yet carries immense intensity. Her patience, the way she respects others, how she offers her loyalty and trust to those who prove themselves worthy. All of this shows that her resistance is not only physical, but primarily emotional. Resisting without losing kindness may be one of humanity's greatest victories. It is as if Kuina transformed her pain into a different lens to see the world. Where many would see only chaos, she can find openings to build connections. Where many would think only of themselves, she values being together, adding strengths. This is the beauty of her journey. Amidst selfishness, she shows that it is possible to survive without giving up empathy. The most inspiring thing is to realize that her strength is not in denying what she felt, but in embracing it all. Kuina does not pretend she never suffered. She does not mask her scars. On the contrary, she carries them as part of her identity. And that is exactly what makes her so real. Those who have tried to erase their pain know it returns even stronger. But when one learns to live with it, something new is born: resilience. This resilience is not theoretical, it is practical. It shows itself in daily choices, trusting, opening up, not letting bitterness swallow you. It is easy to talk about being resilient, but living it is completely different. Kuina proves that resilience is not just resisting, but resisting without losing what makes you human. That is rare. This strength also inspires those around her. After all, it is not just about surviving in a game, but about showing that it is possible to be authentic in any arena of life. People like Kuina function as lighthouses. They do not eliminate the darkness, but illuminate the path enough for others to follow. That type of presence leaves a mark and remains. Yet to fully understand this strength, we need to dive into how each trauma, each pain, and each rejection shaped the way she acts. Because the big question is not only what she went through, but what she did with all of it. And that is exactly where we enter. How these factors shaped her personality and choices inside and outside Alice in Borderland. Family rejection. The first trauma of Kuina is born in the place where, theoretically, she should have felt safest, her own family. Imagine growing up in an environment where every choice you make is questioned, every trait of your identity is challenged, and where love seems to come with asterisks and conditions. This is not only painful, it is paralyzing. It is as if every day she had to choose between being herself or being accepted. This type of rejection is devastating because it directly affects the emotional foundation of any person. Home is, for many, the first safe harbor, but for Kuina, it became an arena of constant judgment. This battle was not only external, but internal as well, because when someone so close denies your essence, the tendency is to believe something is wrong with you. This wound creates invisible scars that she carried for a very long time. How many times have you felt rejected just for being yourself, whether in family, at work, or among friends? This feeling of not belonging hurts more than any physical wound. Kuina lived this to the maximum, and that is why her strength is so rare. Because instead of letting herself be erased, she decided to bloom amidst the concrete. But this decision did not arise overnight. There were nights of crying, of loneliness, of questioning. There were days when she probably thought about giving up everything. But with every fall, she got up with a little more determination. It is at this point that Kuina's story connects with anyone who has ever thought, is it worth continuing to be who I am? Because her answer was a resounding yes. This rejection, as cruel as it was, became fuel. Kuina learned to look at herself and find within herself the validation she did not receive from others. And that is a powerful lesson. When the world does not accept you, you need to learn to accept yourself first. It is like lighting a candle in the darkness, small but able to illuminate the whole path. The family conflict also shaped the way she deals with the world. In Alice in Borderland, it is visible how she values those who truly see her. This appreciation arises precisely from the pain of never having been completely accepted. It is almost as if every gesture of friendship or respect meant much more to her than to any other character. She knows the value of acceptance because she experienced the lack of it. And here, there is something curious. Many people, faced with this type of rejection, become bitter, cold, even cruel. But Kuina chose another path. She did not let pain turn her into stone. She let it mold her into something stronger, yet still human. That is rare. It is as if she understood that rejection said more about others than about her. But if family trauma is already heavy, it was not the only one that left deep marks on her life. There is still the battle against prejudice and the difficulty of finding her place in the outside world, where acceptance was also not simple. And that is where the next trauma begins to draw the complexity of her journey even more. Prejudice and social exclusion. If Kuina already faced battles at home, outside of it, the war was no less intense. Social prejudice acted like an invisible wall, no matter how much she tried to be authentic. There were always sideways glances, whispers, little snickers. This silent exclusion is one of the cruelest forms of violence because it leaves no visible bruises but undermines self-esteem day after day. Prejudice has this corrosive effect. It creates the feeling that you need to justify yourself all the time, as if every move you make is being judged. Kuina experienced this at the maximum intensity. Walking down the street, entering a new space, meeting people, everything became a test of endurance. And yet, she learned to walk with her head held high, even when the world tried to force her down. How many times have you felt out of place somewhere? Perhaps in a circle of friends where you did not fit in, or in a workplace where your voice was not heard. This feeling of not belonging is common, but when amplified by prejudice, the impact is brutal. Kuina carries this wound, but also shows that it is possible to turn it into a source of strength. Prejudice also taught her the importance of empathy, because anyone who has been excluded knows exactly how it hurts to be invisible. In Alice in Borderland, this appears in her relationships. She not only connects with others, but respects them in their essence. It is as if she says, I know what it is like not to be accepted, and I do not want anyone beside me to feel that. This posture creates true bonds amid the chaos. Social exclusion, instead of destroying her, ended up becoming an emotional laboratory. Kuina learned to filter the gaze of others, not letting external judgment define her internal value. This is something we could all practice more, understanding that others' opinions are only a reflection of them, not of our essence. Easy? Not at all. But she shows that it is possible. Interestingly, this trauma also sharpened her sensitivity to identify who truly deserves to be by her side. Instead of surrounding herself with crowds, Kuina values the presence of a few, but true. This comes precisely from the pain of having been excluded. She learned that quantity does not mean quality, and that a single true friendship is worth more than 100 superficial relationships. But of course, one cannot romanticize this pain. Prejudice hurts, leaves scars, creates insecurities, and even someone as strong as Kuina did not come out unscathed. The weight of always needing to prove she is enough does not disappear out of nowhere. It is there, like a silent ghost that follows her steps. The difference is that she learned to dance with this ghost instead of running from it. Yet, in addition to external prejudice, there was still another battle, the one happening inside herself. Because as strong as she was before the world, there were moments when doubts and insecurities corroded her from within. And it is at this point that we dive into another of her greatest internal conflicts. Insecurities and self-image. Even with all the strength she demonstrated, Kuina also carried within herself a broken mirror. Not a physical mirror, but that of self-image, of the way she saw herself and how she believed others saw her. Insecurities were like cracks in that reflection, no matter how much she smiled and showed confidence. There were days when she herself doubted if she was enough. This internal battle is cruel because it does not need external enemies, just the mind itself to be relentless. Kuina lived with internal voices that questioned her choices, reminded her of past rejections, and said, "Do you really deserve to be loved the way you are?" This kind of conflict corrodes because you can conquer the world. But if you do not silence these voices, you never truly feel peace. Who has never looked in the mirror and thought they were not good enough? Whether for your body, the way you speak, the choices you made, we have all gone through moments when self-criticism weighed more than it should. With Kuina, it was no different. Behind her confidence, there were days when insecurity made her feel small, almost invisible. But at the same time, these insecurities also made her human. Because it is easy to admire someone who seems perfect, but it is much more powerful to see greatness in someone who, despite their own doubts, chooses to move forward. Kuina shows that you do not need to be 100% confident to act with courage. And this is a golden lesson. No one waits for the perfect moment to live. Life is lived even with fear. This fragmented self-image shaped the way she sought connection. In Alice in Borderland, we can perceive how much she values the gaze of those who accept her as she is. Because deep down, each gesture of care works like glue for those internal cracks. This does not mean depending on others, but recognizing how true support can strengthen someone who has already fought so much against themselves. Interestingly, these insecurities also acted as a compass. Instead of leaving her paralyzed, they often served as a warning. You may doubt, but you still need to move forward. And this mix of fear and courage is what makes Kuina so inspiring, because deep down, this is exactly how most of us live, with fear but moving forward. The most beautiful thing is realizing that, even carrying all these insecurities, she did not turn them into walls, but into bridges. She chose to be vulnerable, choosing to trust the few who truly deserved it. This is powerful because vulnerability is a form of courage that few understand. Showing one's fragility requires much more strength than hiding it behind a mask. But insecurities were not the end of the line. On the contrary, they made room for Kuina to discover her true source of strength, the ability to resist, to rebuild, and to keep moving with kindness, even after everything. And this is exactly where we enter the next part, how she transforms pain into strength and resilience into a form of light. Everything Kuina went through was not left in the past. On the contrary, each pain left marks that directly influenced who she became. When we look at her choices in Alice in Borderland, it becomes clear that her personal story is always present. It is as if each decision is crossed by a reminder. I already know what it is like to be rejected, so I will not reject those beside me. This creates a posture that values loyalty above all. This loyalty is not just a survival strategy, but a direct reflection of the lack of acceptance she faced. Having experienced such deep rejections taught her the value of staying true to those who truly matter. That is why she does not waste energy on superficialities. Her choices show that instead of seeking everyone's approval, she prefers to cultivate a few solid and true bonds. Another important point is the way prejudice shaped her empathy. Those who have suffered exclusion learn to quickly see the pain in others. Kuina recognizes nuances in others' behavior that often go unnoticed. That is why she approaches broken or fragile people, because she knows exactly what it is like to be in that place. And this empathy influences all her interactions. Her internal insecurities, instead of paralyzing her, became fuel. They made her more cautious, yes, but also more strategic. In risky situations, her mind always seems to calculate the effects of each step. It is not empty perfectionism, but care shaped by the fear of making a mistake and losing everything. That explains why her choices, as daring as they seem, always carry silent wisdom. It is interesting to notice that even her strength did not arise as a natural gift, but as a consequence of these scars. Her ability to remain good, even when it would have been easier to harden, shapes a rare identity. In Alice in Borderland, this makes her different from the other players, who often give in to selfishness or brutality. Instead of fighting against the world, she chooses to walk firmly without losing her essence. These choices also show how Kuina understands the value of vulnerability. She does not completely hide her pain. On the contrary, she uses her story to create connection. How many times in real life do we distance ourselves from people precisely because we think we need to appear strong all the time? Kuina does the opposite. She shows strength by being authentic, and this authenticity attracts trust. It is curious how her scars do not limit her but guide her. They work as an emotional compass, always reminding what is worth it and what is not. Thus, her decisions do not arise only from the cold logic of survival, but from a rare balance between rationality and humanity. This balance shapes not only her trajectory in the game, but also the way she inspires the viewer. And in the end, what we see is that Kuina is not strong despite her traumas, but precisely because of them. Each rejection, each prejudice, each insecurity contributed to building the person she chooses to be today. But there is still one essential point in this journey. What can this strength and this story teach us, who are here outside the screen, living our own battles? Kuina teaches us, above all, that pain does not need to be a prison. She shows that it is possible to go through rejections, prejudices, and insecurities without letting them destroy your essence. This is a powerful reminder. The world may try to shape you, may even try to erase who you are, but the final choice to remain authentic will always be yours. It is a direct message. Do not forget who you are, even when everything around insists on changing you. Another striking lesson is the importance of vulnerability. Kuina is not afraid to show her scars, and that is precisely what makes her inspiring. Because if we stop to think, what truly connects people is not perfection, but shared imperfection. Those who open up create bonds. Those who pretend to be unshakable end up alone. This is a point that anyone can take into life. She also reminds us that being strong does not mean being cold. In the real world, we often confuse strength with insensitivity. But Kuina proves otherwise. Her strength comes from care, empathy, and the ability to remain human even in the face of chaos. This invites us to rethink. Isn't true strength in continuing to be good even when it would be easier to be harsh? There is also the matter of practical resilience. Kuina did not just endure, she transformed her pain into action. That is the difference between surviving and living. Surviving is closing off, waiting for the storm to pass. Living is dancing in the storm, using each fall as momentum. And this is a lesson that resonates far beyond the series. Life does not wait for you to be ready. It happens in the midst of your uncertainties. Another important point is that Kuina shows how empathy is a tool for survival. In Alice in Borderland, trusting others may seem risky. But contrary to what many think, it is precisely this choice that opens unexpected paths. In real life, this translates into learning to value genuine connections. Sometimes it is an outstretched hand that saves us in the middle of chaos. She also teaches us about the courage to simply be, not the courage to fight dragons or face grand battles, but the daily courage to wake up and be yourself without apologizing. It seems simple, but it is one of the hardest tasks in a world full of judgment. Kuina shows that this is the greatest victory, not losing oneself, More than that, her journey shows us that scars do not need to be hidden but celebrated, because they are what tell our story. Looking at Kuina, we realize that each pain carried can be transformed into a source of inspiration, not just for oneself, but for everyone around. After all, anyone who has survived their own internal war knows exactly how to guide others through chaos. And in the end, the great lesson is this: life will always test who you are, but it is up to you to decide whether the tests will harden or refine you. Kuina chose to be refined. She chose to become light instead of shadow. And this leaves us with an inevitable question. Facing our own pains and conflicts, are we also choosing the path that makes us better? So, what did you think of Kuina's story and strength? Can you identify with any of the conflicts she faced? Each trauma, each rejection, and each insecurity she overcame teaches us something valuable about resilience, empathy, and the courage to continue being authentic. I want to know, which character do you want me to analyze in the next video? Do not forget to subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to keep learning about these stories that make us reflect and grow. After all, each character's life is an opportunity to learn about our own journey.